Boom! According to that, I am live. That gain is up way too high. I'm going to turn that down. Boom, 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 boom. Let's get that out of the red line zone. There we go. Nice to see you all. New camera tonight. So actually, let me show you. I actually just got like a 1,000 yen, like less than $10 attachment that I finally managed to connect my nice camera to USB, and it looks pretty good actually. I'm just curious, is the sound in sync with the video? I did make an adjustment where I deliberately lagged the sound like 30 milliseconds, which might be too much actually. Yeah, nice to see everybody. Just to show off the technical change. The normal video is this. This is a webcam, and this looks perfectly okay actually. As you can see, it's just not quite as sharp, and that might actually be a good thing. You might not want to actually see my face too clearly. But this is quite a bit different, as you can see. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. We'll just see if it holds out. There's some things with the battery. Sometimes it stops recognizing the battery, and I don't know why, and so on. But yeah. Mr. Quarty Chap, this is not 60 FPS. This is 30 FPS. Even if I got a 60 FPS capture card, I wouldn't like run it through here at more than that. For live streaming, you don't need. If it was like a game or something like that, sure, it's 60 FPS is nice, but most videos are less than 30, so I'm just doing it at 30. So yeah, anyway, just an experiment, but hope it looks pretty good. I have some topics for you tonight, as I do every week. Not a lot this week. The main thing, of course, is that Omicron is getting crazy in Tokyo and elsewhere, still compared to, of course, to other parts of the world, still relatively okay, but the rate of increase is quite alarming. So we've gone from like 60 cases a day and 70 cases a day to 1,300 cases, and you know, the testing has not increased dramatically. It's not the result of testing. In fact, over the New Year's break, testing went down, probably because people had left Tokyo, and that's the real concern, is that given that most of the positive cases that are happening now are the results of people catching it like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, probably the end of year break is when those cases numbers are really going to go up, which we're not going to see until this week. So that is what's alarming the most. Yeah, and it looks like being vaccinated is probably helpful for not feeling it as badly, but it doesn't seem to stop you catching it. So yeah, it's a shame. I thought it was getting better. I thought the country was about to open up. There is a good question as to whether the country actually, what's the point in continuing to close the border when, you know, US troops have been coming in and out without being tested, bringing Omicron in and causing basically massive, and maybe this would have happened anyway from Japanese people bringing it in, but certainly around the bases where there have been significant outbreaks, around Camp Hansen in Okinawa and Iwakuni in Hiroshima and a couple of other places, there have been significant community outbreaks. So, you know, and this has become a source of diplomatic tension. Although, you know, the point is, it's here, it's spreading. If even one person had brought it and spread it, you know, whether they were US military or a Japanese returnee, and that seems to be the case in Tokyo, definitely not US military's fault in Tokyo, it'd be spreading like crazy anyway. So that's where we are with that at the moment. But there is a thing, you know, so far it's mostly young people and vaccinated people, so the number of hospital cases is not rising. Again, the same trend as everywhere else, but the thing is, just when so many people are catching it and look like they're going to catch it, eventually the hospitals are going to still get into trouble with that, so we'll see what happens. But you know, given that the purpose of the border restrictions was to keep it out, and clearly that's already, the horse is bolted on that, there is a question as to whether they, you know, do we need to keep making the country suffer and people waiting to get into the country suffer for not having the border restrictions? And if you ask me, it doesn't really make sense, you know, with testing, quarantine and so on. Arguably the people coming back in, there's the question about the capacity of immigration to handle foreigners as well as Japanese coming back into the country. Of course, Japanese can still return. Oh, and there goes the battery. Okay, well, that's an issue. I used this camera all day the other day and it was fine. So you know what? I am going to move that down and go back to the regular web camera. I'll get that good, nice camera going and fix that. Perhaps later during the week I'll try to get this framed about the same. Yeah, it is quite nice when it's working, right? Fortunately, I came with a backup, so technical issue averted. But anyway, So because of this, it looks like I was just starting to go back to work and see people and do things, and it looks like I've got to put that on ice again, which is a shame, but that is what it is. But yeah, let's say hello to everybody. I've got stories to talk about, but let's see who's in here in the chat. Again, sorry for being 5 minutes late starting. We've got Kerberos Tenshi, great to see you. Woohoo, back indeed. We've got Theodore Sharp, good to see you, Theodore. Mr. Cordy Chap, good to see you. Quentin Rankid, Odie Jr., boom, diggity indeed. It's been a while, Theodore, indeed. Now that you mention it, it has been. Good to see you back. We've got Ada Void, good morning. Good morning, Arizona, good to see you. We've got Barry Convex, good to see you. I thought I was having a day off. I've got nowhere to go. I was just doing home stuff, running around a bit, but no, I'm here. Sorry, I was a bit late. A bit of a lag. Is the audio lagging behind the video? Because I made the audio lag deliberately, and if that's the case, I might just remove the lag, or the audio lag, which I built into it. I can adjust that. Just curious. Odie Jr. says a bit of a lag. Clap my hands so you can see. So, you know what? I think the video looks like it's not lagging, in which case the adjustment I did to the sound probably will be making it lag. I'm going to do a quick on-the-fly adjustment because I like to live dangerously. Let's just take out the offset. Boom. Okay. So now this should be just matching the same as the video. Maybe this is all I need to do. Anyway, no 60 FPS, Mr. Cordy Chap, indeed. But, you know, I don't think you need to see me that clearly. By the way, just an experiment. I did just take out the deliberate audio lag of 30 FPS that I put in to try to make it match for the capture. But you know what? It looks like it's moving to me at the same time. So I just took it out. So hopefully it should be in better sync now. Anyway, I will check it later. Let me know now if it looks like it's out of sync and it was better before, and I'll put the settings back. Yeah, Tokyo 503, good to see you. Thank you. Sound and video good. That was from before though, so we'll see. Maybe I just ruined it, but that's a feature of the show. Sergeant Bilko, good to see you and everybody else indeed. We've got AV84K, hi all. We've got oh, jumped ahead there a moment. We've got One John-san, good evening. Good to see you, One John-san. We've got Aaron, open the borders, damn it, indeed. Amen. Thanks as always, Aaron. Great to have you moderating, and nice to see you. Hope you're having a good 2022. We've got Tyrone's Kitchen. Hey, good to see you, Tyrone's Kitchen. Good to have you here in the chat. Another not so familiar name. We've got Zushi Kate Tomoto. Zushi Kate Tomoto Shift. Good to have you in here. And yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly the nature of this new one, but it certainly seems to be like everyone can, like, I get the feeling you can probably catch it off the train, the way the numbers are going up. So I am nervous about going into work now, so yes, indeed. Who else we got in here? We've got Quentin Rankid, clap my hands, that's right, so you can see the mic. Audio lag's just a tiny bit, so maybe I just fixed it because I built in a deliberate audio lag before, and you know what, I'm looking at this and it doesn't look like the video is actually lagging. I don't think I needed to match it, so yeah. Is the chat lagging? Brain is lagging, everybody's lagging. Well, it is the start of the year and that is sort of natural. So yeah, anyway, great to see everybody. Oh, you know what, of course now I've got it turned off, so actually now with the regular USB camera, yeah, that was the right thing to switch the sound. That's really annoying that camera error is happening, and I want to fix it, but I'm not going to fix it live on the show. Shubhas, not too late at all. We just started. Good to have you in here. Remember, everybody, if you want to say hello to me, if you want to grab my attention, one, I'd appreciate just if you're watching, just say hello. It's just nice to see who's watching. It's nice to shout out people who are here. That's kind of a feature of the show. If you have a comment that you would like me to pay attention to, or a request or a question or whatever, just do it. Quint Rankid and others here did. Just say my name. You don't even need the @ mark, actually. Just write Hiko Simon, spell it correctly, and it will flash orange. And when I flash back after each story and check through the comments, I will pause on the comments that are orange like that. So, yeah, you know, please do that. Also, I'll mention later on as well, but remember to like if you like, of course. I do appreciate it, and that's pretty much all I'm doing it for now, is to please the algorithm gods. So, yeah, anyway, let's dive into the topics that we've got for today. Interesting one here, maybe sign of the times. Pachinko parlors in Japan are decreasing rapidly, down 12% in the last 2 years. I don't know very much about this other than I remember at the start of the pandemic, pachinko parlors drew a lot of negative attention. I mean, along with things like surfing, which were kind of irrational from a perspective of high-risk activities for spreading COVID. Although pachinko kind of is, you're kind of in, well, I mean, it's already got this impression basically of being a lot of elderly men smoking, hunched over a pinball machine, a vertical pinball machine, of course. For those who don't know what pachinko is, it's like a pinball machine, but it's mounted vertically. It looks like a slots machine, which is basically what it is. It is a form of quasi-legal gambling. Gambling is illegal in Japan, including slot machines and so on. But you can, within a pachinko parlor, you can play slot machines and these pinball machines that are used for gambling, where you receive a bunch of silver, the playing balls that you put into the machine that you have at the end. If those increase, you can exchange those not for money, but for plastic trophies and prizes. And some of those prizes, I understand from people who play pachinko, actually, they can be like useful things, like a Yakiniku beef dinner ticket or something like that you might just go and use directly. But most of the time, you'll just select the plastic trophy, and there will just happen to coincidentally be a completely unrelated plastic trophy collection pawn shop just outside of the pachinko parlor, where you can go and exchange it for money. And so long as you're using, they call it the 3-point system, where you're not actually exchanging the prizes for money directly in the establishment, so long as you're going to a completely unrelated plastic trophy collecting shop nearby, then the police won't prosecute it, is the interpretation that the police have always used since World War II, even though clearly it is gambling for money. And for a country where gambling is illegal, Japan has tens of millions of gambling addicts because of pachinko. Interesting history behind pachinko as well, as most people familiar with Japan kind of understand. Pachinko is basically dominated, or traditionally, this has now changed, particularly in the last 30 years or so, but certainly in the post-war period, it was known for being dominated by the Korean community in Japan, both the pro-South community and the pro-North Korean community. In fact, it became one of the things that when it came out that North Korea actually really had kidnapped people and was doing a bunch of other bad things in Japan, a lot of people were talking about, like when they were testing missiles over Japan, people were talking about how, well, people playing pachinko is getting fed into. A lot of these were businesses that were paying tithes to the North Korean government. So in a way, Japanese pachinko players were paying for the rockets that were being fired over Japan. Various things happened in the late 1990s, particularly with relations collapsing between North Korea and Japan, which actually led to a lot of those North Korean residents of Japan naturalizing and becoming Japanese citizens and renouncing their North Korean ties. A lot of them for various reasons. I mean, very complicated situation being a North Korean citizen in Japan. But I think for most of the post-war period, people felt like, like North Korea were the good guys. They were the only ones not being dominated by an outside power. They were idealistic. They were socialist. And there were even a lot of Japanese people actually who supported North Korea out of shared ideology. But when they started to realize what that regime really was, and particularly things like the fact that they actually kidnapped Japanese people to train their spies, when the North Korean community in Japan had always mocked those allegations, saying, why would they have to kidnap Japanese people to teach North Korean spies how to be Japanese when they have loyal North Korean, citizens who are born and raised in Japan and for all intents and purposes completely Japanese. And then they found out one day that, North Korea had been abducting Japanese people because they didn't trust their own citizens in Japan as being loyal enough to train their spies. And, that I think that made a lot of North Koreans throw up their hands. All sorts of complicated, stuff that you can go into with that relationship. But it was partly because post-war, when you had all of these Koreans who for a long time were stateless. Actually, it wasn't until 1965 that South Korea and Japan even had diplomatic relations. So all of those Koreans who lived in Japan, and remember, Korea had been a part of Japan since, it was colonized. But it was colonized, like not like Hong Kong was colonized, where it was colonized but people from Hong Kong couldn't vote in UK elections. It was colonized in the sense it was more like the Austrian Anschluss. South Koreans could vote. They had representatives in the Japanese parliament. So like Taiwanese people, South Koreans, were Japanese citizens, and they had their citizenship stripped and became stateless in Japan after World War II. And, they lost access to a lot of things. And, they lost passports, the ability to, they became this huge community of stateless people. And one thing that a lot of Koreans did basically to survive after World War II was they started up these pachinko parlors, and, people who were sympathetic to their plight would sort of pressure the police to let them be, to sort of look the other way, even though it was clearly gambling. It was something that was sort of tolerated by society in general as a substitute for the state having to pay social welfare, and need to actually look after these people. It gave a means for the Korean community in the wake of World War II in Tokyo, when Japan was destroyed, to look after themselves and not rely on the Japanese government to actually treat them, like regular citizens. Of course, that fostered a whole economy for gangs and for the North Korean government and all this other kind of stuff. But at the same time, it served a really key role in helping the South Korean and North Korean communities survive at first, and then establish their own communities with schools, support networks and so on after World War II. And it was a large source of income, basically with lots of Japanese people gambling and enjoying pachinko, and with the police agreeing to look the other way. It was a weird kind of a hybrid system where, it kind of served as like a a black economy for that community. I mean, of course, there were Japanese people also who ran pachinko parlors, and indeed it's also known for its kind of gang affiliations and, prone to robberies and so on, prone to having gambling addicts and people who become addicts being targeted by loan sharks. And getting into all kinds of things. Women addicts get targeted for prostitution and human trafficking and all that sort of stuff. All sorts of horrible stuff associated with pachinko industry. But that said, I mean, pachinko itself is basically, being considered a regular, legitimate line of business, even though it doesn't make any sense how it's legal under a law where, where gambling is not allowed in Japan. So all of that said, it's something that even when I came to Japan in the 1990s was still pretty mainstream. It was almost as normal as going to karaoke to go and play pachinko, and a lot of people took it very seriously. In fact, some people, there are magazines dedicated to it, people who make a living from it. That said, why is it going down? No question in the last 2 years, a big part of it is just the general image of it, being not healthy during a pandemic, to be like a place where I don't know of any clusters that were ever confirmed as being from pachinko parlors, but it was one of the things that was targeted. If it's not good for coronavirus, it's one of those things that generally society wasn't comfortable with being there anyway, for all the reasons that I've just shared. Anyway, it's kind of associated with kind of seediness and, elderly gambling addicts and gangsters and North Korean spies and all this other kind of true and not true stuff, but all mixed together, that has just a generally negative image in Japan, besides the fact, and everybody, when they have those negative feelings, saying, how is this legal again? Like, can anybody actually justify this? And so, it's funny it's going down. I suspect its popularity going down is probably the addicts are not going as much. Maybe they've been able to break the habit with, of course, coronavirus, but I think it's also part sign of the times, just the same way that karaoke parlors and other things are less popular now, just because it's not as normal to do, like golf, driving ranges and stuff like that, not as normal as they used to be. It's just kind of sign of the times. It's just something that people don't really do anymore. If you've given the choice, but for young people, between hanging out with a bunch of elderly smoking gambling addicts or playing games online, there's pretty obvious choices. It's hard to really imagine too many young people getting into it unless they're actually like addicted. So it kind of makes sense. And honestly speaking, they are noisy and they are kind of eyesores, and they're tied with so much sort of dodgy stuff, which isn't to say that, they're not generally, they're treated as legitimate, normal companies in society. And the whole associations with the Korean thing, by the way, is actually much, much less in the last couple of decades. Partly because the Koreans themselves have naturalized and kind of disowned those ties themselves. But yeah, very interesting that there is data that those are going down. So yeah, that's the first story. Into the comments. I wonder if anyone here, has anyone here ever actually played pachinko? I've played it like once or twice, lost a bunch of money in a short period of time and did not make any sense to me. It was not fun and lost money. So yeah. We've got, wow, I wish I could read Das Vidania. Looks Russian, could be Cyrillic, could be another Cyrillic country, and that looks kind of suspicious. But welcome if you are not a robot. Pachinko is indeed painfully loud, Aaron. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense really. Yes, born in Nagoya, did not know that. 84. Yes, all of that. Well, lots of things in Japan technically are illegal, but are kind of allowed, indeed. AV84K, I believe it's also the reason why Pokemon games have the one building with the slots and another with the Pokemon prizes. I don't even know about that, but okay, that kind of makes sense, I guess. You mean the gacha machines, right? Black Tengu, g'day. Good to see our Greek representative in here. Also ban only Zushi Kate Tomoto Shift. Yeah, ban everything. Why not? I mean, I don't really care that much. I actually think pachinko is probably more harmful generally than OnlyFans, but there again, I don't know that much about it. So yeah. Dan H, good to see you, Dan H. We've got Kerberos Tenchi, one of the sushi chefs at your former job, always went back to Japan twice a year just to play pachinko. Usually lost between 1,000 and 3,000 euro on it. That just makes no sense to me at all. To me, I'd rather go to a games arcade. And I guess back in the day when games cost 100 yen each, you could play, like, even if I sucked at video games, you could play a game that I was good at, like a racing game, and have a good time. On 3,000 yen, you could play for an hour, more than an hour, enjoy it, and be happy to part with the money. But to go to a pachinko parlor, you can lose that money in like 15 minutes and not have any fun and come out confused and with a headache. It just doesn't make sense to me. I get it. If you're good enough that you can start to win, I guess it might get a little bit interesting, but no, it never made sense to me. Yeah, you said euros, so actually I couldn't even imagine if you're playing Tekken with 3,000 euros. Well, you'd need to be hospitalized, but you'd have a good time. Somnyad, good to see a Somnyad. Nice to see another. Husband used to be a Pachi Pro. Okay, I used to have a kohai at my job, at my last job, who was a Pachi Pro. In fact, he was into slot machines. And yeah, he would often you could see every Monday, you could tell by the look in his eyes if he won or didn't win. But the thing is, even for the people who win, I don't know about your husband, but they'll often go and splash out and eat yakiniku, and that's the reason they put these things in the bar districts, is to encourage people when they win to spend the money in the neighborhood anyway. But yeah, wow, that's pretty intense though, being a professional pachinko player. At least they are very interesting indeed. So next topic, Japan's productivity ranks lowest among G7 nations for 50 straight years. Now bear in mind, we're talking not about the OECD, we're talking about the G7, which is, Canada, America, Italy, Germany. In fact, what other G7 ones? Interesting to see the full list of OECD nations, where Japan isn't quite so bad, it's more in the middle. But, and interestingly, ahead of South Korea and ahead of, which is not in the G7, I guess, yeah, and ahead of New Zealand, where I'm from. Where is Australia? I mean, I think the thing about, how they calculate per hour productivity, I think it's based on the generation of wealth, per hour worked by people or whatever. They sort of put those things together. So Japan has a lot of people, but it's not generating as much wealth. Australia has a benefit that, honestly, you just need a guy with a shovel, and, half of Australia's economy is digging holes in the ground. They are literally a lucky country in that regard. So they're always, I guess, going to be a little bit more. I don't think it means that Australians work necessarily harder than New Zealanders. It just means that they have ways that they can access a lot of money more easily. But this is it in terms of the whole overall economy thing. Japan is famous for having a lot of people doing a lot of jobs that don't really generate wealth, And while it's a good index, I still think it's kind of nice that the country looks after. For example, you think about the retired people who you see acting as car parking assistants in the supermarkets out in the suburbs. They're supplementing their pensions. They want to do something. They get to work with other people. They get to be productive and appreciated people. Now, do the supermarkets need to employ those people? If they were just trying to get the most efficient, milk all their employees and whatever for the greatest efficiency, yeah, you could get rid of those parking assistants and you could probably get rid of half the people working the registers. But it's kind of nice that the supermarkets kind of think from a perspective that it's a good thing. It's giving back to the local community to support people by giving jobs like that, even if they're not super productive. It's also, anyone who's ever worked in a Japanese company knows that working as fast as possible is not rewarded. If you're given a deadline like 4 days ahead, finishing a day early, you'll get punished for it. It'll be assumed that you're trying to avoid extra work. And I've had this explained to me. The assumption is that you are to use all of the time in the deadline to do the best job possible. If you finish the whole thing, spell check it again, reformat it, do anything to make sure that you are, even no matter how inefficient, to use the time. So there's partly philosophical issues behind this, so it's not entirely surprising, and I don't think it makes Japan stand out as uniquely inefficient compared to other countries. Like I said, it's more efficient than the country that I came from, according to this. But interesting again that Japan just does have this lowest on a per hour basis productivity, which I think anyone who comes to Japan can kind of see that, certainly. And look, I question, if you talk about per hour productivity, one thing I find whenever I go to America and I observe how terrible the services and how terrible the facilities are, and so on, it helps me to appreciate a little bit the way that Japan and some other countries put value on things that are not directly connected to collecting money. When you're on an airliner, you don't feel like the airline's trying to squeeze centimeters off your armrests and save $5 on the airline food that they're serving you, and and screwing over the airline staff just a little bit, just to make them a little bit extra cranky, but within the tolerances that you'll still pay for a ticket. That's what I feel like when I'm flying in America, and I don't feel like that when I'm flying in Japan. It's there's a basic idea that a job is worth doing well. It's worth spending a little bit of extra time, even if it's not for the pure purpose of generating extra profit. So I kind of think, in a way, from living in Japan, Japan doesn't have to be the most efficient, but of course it does also reflect the fact that Japan's wages are the same in Japan as they were 30 years ago at the start of the 1990s. They haven't changed. Every other country, it's just natural inflation that over time wages go up. People talk about buying a car, today, and how much that, in 1990, and how much that costs in today's money. In Japan, 30 years ago is today's money. Everything is still the same. So the world has kind of moved on as well, and that's partly a reflection, I think, of the way that the economy is just getting old and kind of declining. And it's a way that maybe you can soften the decline by just letting everything stay the same and not go up. But it is a problem right now in Japan. So, yeah. Interesting one there anyway. Dan H saying that productivity numbers slightly fudged in Australia due to its insane real estate market and new housing developments. True as well. But you know what? That would also be helping New Zealand. In fact, Auckland's housing market is actually, a house in Auckland right now costs the same as a house in Sydney. In both places, it's ridiculous. But, I don't understand how people can live in Auckland. I really don't. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, there is a whole generation in Australia and New Zealand now that's given up entirely on the idea of being able to own a house. No question. There's been a bubble there that's gone through different phases, and that is definitely distorting it. AV84K, that sounds like school projects. Well, life can be like school projects sometimes. I agree. Barry Convex, the service in America is bad. Well, wait till you get to the UK. American service is regarded as the gold standard in the UK. I've only been to the UK a couple of times. Yeah, I don't know. I always find service in America to be just brutal, just bad. Like affirmatively bad everywhere. with the UK, I don't know. Well, I guess I haven't really, when I've been to the UK, it's only been a couple of times, and each time it's only been to stay with relatives, for family events. So maybe I haven't encountered it as much in the UK, and I have no real desire to go and check it out, to tell you the truth. But geez, if you guys are looking at America, like it's the gold standard of service. Again, being in West, so I guess we say East Asia, but Western Pacific Rim. I mean, Australia and New Zealand do okay, but I must admit, when you fly Singapore Airlines or Thai Airways or Cathay or Japan Airlines or Korean Airlines or anything like that, and I think it's a great cultural lesson, just the concept of service, and I think it translates over. I had someone asking me the other week, with the pandemic, has service gotten worse in Japan? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said to me, like in America, a lot of restaurants are operating like with fewer people. And the customers are crankier, and the staff are more overworked because there are fewer people working, and it's tangible that there are just that you're dealing with very, very stressed out people, and overall service is just getting worse during the pandemic. And he asked me, does it feel the same in Japan? And you know what? I think all the same things are here. People are more stressed out, and certainly, like restaurant service and so on, lots of businesses are going out of business. But that said, when I've gone out, when I've eaten out or done anything, I haven't noticed any change, which is, I think that there's just a very strong culture of how you're supposed to behave in service situations in Japan, and maybe that's offered some resiliency. But hearing that it's gotten worse kind of makes logical sense, but I didn't even understand the question when I was asked it. I'm curious if people watching have observed the same things in the parts of the world that they're in, have they seen service get worse. Iraq 299, good to have you with us. Quinn Rankid, when I'm in the US, do I tip? When I remember to, I've gotten in trouble a couple of times for just forgetting to, and I do think it's an awful, terrible culture. I mean, just pay people enough. Like the idea that, and also tell me how much to pay. When I'm traveling, I expect to pay for meals, right? So if I go to a restaurant and I have a meal and it's like $40 or whatever, call me naive, but everywhere I've grown up in my life, I'll pay. And if it turns out I was actually supposed to pay $50 for that, fine, I'll pay. But like writing $40 and getting upset at me when I pay what it says, and then not knowing how to calculate the tip or whatever. And people like reacting to that, I hate that. And I feel bad about it, because then I hear that, it's because they're not paying the staff, and they rely on those tips. That's the same as begging. Seriously, what kind of crappy restaurant doesn't pay its staff enough that they need to beg for money from customers? And the fact that the whole system works on that, I can't stand it. It offends me. But I do try to remember, and I do try to do like 15% on everything for tips, but I forget sometimes, and it stresses me out like crazy when I'm in the US. It's terrible culture. Try India, shanty. I would love to try India, actually. And Quinn Rankit, is the US being wait staff, in the US, being wait staff is considered to be a sales job. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, look, you have some great service, there are some great restaurants, you meet some great people, of course, it's all sorts, but the fact that, but like I say, it's just one of those things that's different about Japan, even from New Zealand, by the way. And New Zealand has tipping, but you only pay tipping in, above and beyond situations. It's not mandatory like in America. So yeah, anyway. Next one that was interesting this week that caught my attention. Goodman man arrested for attempted marriage of a woman without her knowledge. This is like, gang arrested trying to break into prison. I don't understand this crime at all. Apparently, the person in this case was a stalker and was having like a delusional fantasy about being married to a woman, and so actually went and got the paperwork from the city council and got a witness and attempted to submit a forged wedding certificate that he was married to a woman who he was stalking. So yeah, that kind of isn't cool. But there again, of all of the things, of all of the types of crime that exist, it does show in Japan, of course, how easy it is both to marry and to divorce. Alarmingly simple. You don't have to go to Las Vegas to do it in a hurry. You just have to go up to the city council office and fill out a form. It's the same as, you know, getting a permit to put a basketball hoop up. Pretty much, it's the same. And you might think by how easy it is both to do and undo, it's the same level of commitment. But yeah, you know, it is super easy in Japan to get married. You know, and of course you don't have the religious thing. You don't have a requirement that it's in a church. You don't have these sort of long periods and whatever. You don't have to have a justice of the peace. You know, do the ceremony, anything like that. It's very straightforward, and hence, you know, sooner or later, I suppose, in a country of 120 million people, somebody was just going to try to fill out a form. I guess if you had a system like this in America, maybe you would have lots of people submitting fake marriage certificates with Taylor Swift or whatever to their city council offices. Who knows? Who knows? Scenarios I can't comprehend. I can't comprehend in any situation, but I know that a lot of men in particular just have some really messed up things. I guess it could happen either way. But yes. On the one hand, yeah, a lot of people reacting on the internet that it's creepy. The government apparently accepted the registration at one point. He wanted to marry the woman because he liked her, but he just thought rather than ask her out, he just submitted a wedding certificate. Pretty disturbing, but that is part of Japan. So yeah. So yeah, no problem. Hijo, I used to study Spanish, and that was you can call me Eco. That's cool. So yeah, that is behind me. This is the Rocket Lab Neutron rocket. This is 3D printed from the UK. It looks really cool. I love it. This is a very cool rocket. In fact, I'll just put it there where it's in there. It kind of looks like a missile from the background. But what's cool about this is that it is shaped in a it's fatter at the bottom, which actually means that it would work like a lifting body design. It would actually be able to re-enter without even needing that much in the way of parachutes to slow it down. It's this new design for a rocket, that Rocket Lab, which is a New Zealand-based. It's registered in America so that they can do defense things, but in truth it is a New Zealand company that sort of pretends to be an American company. But this is going to have the same launch capacity as the SpaceX Falcon 9. It's going to compete with SpaceX like for launching satellites, and it's going to be like fly up and land vertically and be able to turn around in 2 days is the idea. And it is just super cool. It's got the top part of it opens up like in the Bond movie, where there was a thing which could like capture spaceships like with claws. It does like the opposite of that with the fairing. It's just a super cool rocket, and I saw this thing, and I've got the SpaceX Starship model behind me, and I just thought, well, can I get this? And I googled around, is there a model for this anywhere? And it turns out that on Etsy, the 3D printing site, there are people who have just really good 3D printing setups, and yeah, this is like $40, and I was like, yeah, well, it looks pretty cool, so let's see what it looks like. And it's the quality is really good, and to think this came from a 3D printer, I can't think of a reason to have a 3D printer myself, honestly. Like at home, I wouldn't have that much stuff. But for someone with a 3D printer to like sell cool stuff that I can't buy, there's no commercial model of this being sold. It's only got announced like 2 weeks ago, and it was only with pictures. You know, they haven't actually made it yet. They're in the process of making it. But this is a super cool rocket. It is a New Zealand rocket that's it blows my mind that there is a whole a successful space agency in New Zealand that launches like from an area near to where I used to live, actually, in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, to me, this idea of this rocket for their next one, they've just been launching a lot of mini-sats recently, including, but they're going to be launching a probe to like Venus soon. They're doing a bunch of cool stuff, but the fact they're actually getting into heavy launching, and the fact that this could even be human rated, you could even put people into space on this. And this could be out in a few years. It's super cool what's happening. All the space stuff right now. I think I've got another one in here with the James Webb Space Telescope. They've just finished all of the unfolding, all the mirrors and the sun shield and all that sort of stuff. It's still just going to take 6 months before that thing starts taking proper photos, but there's just so much cool stuff happening with space right now. And the fact that, you know... The fact that there is a couple of New Zealanders who have just done this. The fact also, just one thing I really like about the fact that model is 3D printed is that it's not dissimilar to how the real rockets are made. The Rocket Lab rockets. New Zealand is really famous for boat making, and you know we actually, when New Zealand won the America's Cup, one of the innovations was having a carbon fiber boat. You know, fiber rather than the traditional fiberglass. They figured out ways to basically make these carbon fiber boats that were super light. Yeah, they've sort of taken that technology and they're using it to build rockets, and it's something that they haven't figured out really how to do in America yet, but I think New Zealand just has a lot of expertise with it. But they're basically 3D printing carbon fiber rockets, and they come out naturally like that because that's that color, because that's the material that they're using, and they're super light, they're super strong, and very efficient. Yeah, it's very cool. And just so many cool things happening with space like this year. The fact that space tourism just started, the fact that if things really get going, if Blue Origin can get those B4 rockets done, that there'll be the United Launch Alliance rocket, the Centaur going up, which is going to allow a whole bunch of heavy lift rockets to put like space stations up into orbit, including New Glenn, hopefully, if that can launch in the next couple of years. As well as, of course, SpaceX doing crazy stuff, the lunar landing program, the Mars program, all going like crazy. There's just so much cool stuff in space at the moment. I love that stuff. And part of the reason I love that stuff is because I used to live in the central plateau of the North Island of New Zealand in a big army camp called Waihuru, which is now a lot smaller than it used to be. But it's at an altitude of about 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet. Because it's just in a horrible place, just with terrible weather, no one lives there, so there's no light pollution, so it just has amazing skies. And that's how I got into space as a kid, was just I'd go to sleep like with the curtains open so I could see the stars out the window, and it was just cool. And these are launched from the east coast, which is beautiful, very sunny part of New Zealand, but very close by there. But just blows my mind that there's actually of the biggest launch companies in the world right now, that one of them is there, and it's made by New Zealanders. So little bit of pride there, but super cool times. Rockets, my second favorite topic, yes, other than butter. It looks like we have the spam bots in here, and that is not cool. But I don't know why you even try. Obviously, don't click on anything or type anything that the KGB bots are putting in there in the chat. The Soft Distortion, Happy New Year to you. Great to have you in. Don't recognize the handle name, but Happy New Year indeed, and good to have you here in the chat. Auntie Liana in Yokohama, konbanwa, good to have you here in the chat indeed. Boom, let's see what we've got next. What story was this? Ore Corona, oh yeah, this came up today. You remember like when Corona started, there were like three cases, all in Nagoya, in Aichi Prefecture, of people like usually they didn't have it, but they would just cause a nuisance by getting onto a train or going to the city council office, or like just like annoying people, and they'd shout at them, I have coronavirus. And they'd be arrested by police for disturbing for disturbing the peace. Well, it turns out some 20-year-old who was a bit stressed out, again in Nagoya, first time in a while, did shout out on a train, started screaming, I have corona, I have corona. The police arrested him, and they gave him a PCR test, and it turns out that he did have corona. Maybe he didn't even realize it. But again, lots of people have corona, but there are not many people who like cause a public disturbance and get arrested for screaming it at people. But this is like the third or fourth time it's happened in Nagoya. I don't get it. Toyota Town. Maybe it's all the driving gets to people, but this was on a train. I don't understand what it is with Nagoya, that people feel the urge to start screaming at each other that they have coronavirus. But there you go. Can't escape the Rona. One Johnson. Have I thought about working in the space industry? When I was a kid, it was my life's ambition to become an astrophysicist and become a mission specialist, become a U.S. citizen, to move to Texas and become a mission specialist on the space shuttle. Turned out I wasn't very good at physics. I was more of an arts student than a sciences student. That kind of crushed me a little bit. But I must admit, I am tangentially. I think the thing is also, to be in most space industry stuff, it's normally US centric, and you need security clearance, which requires citizenship or a green card or something. So it's restricted what you can actually work. Like I don't think I'd be allowed to actually work. Unless I changed my citizenship, I wouldn't be allowed to work for a US space company, and I wouldn't want to work for Mitsubishi Heavy, although that would be pretty cool, working on the H2 in Japan. However, a lot of big private companies are now doing space-related stuff, and it's getting so broad. I am lucky that I am not working directly on space stuff, but I am working at a place that has some involvement in some space stuff. And to me, that is super cool. And I like the fact that space now is getting so not just national security, but so commercial, and so many big companies are starting to get into it in different ways. I can see ways that before I retire, it's possible that I could work directly in things that are directly connected with space-related economy in different sort of ways. I mean, all sorts of different capacities, as well as the fact that I'm hoping that, maybe before I get to retirement age, if there is a retirement age when I retire, that I might be able to actually even travel into space. I expect both of those things will come true, as well as there'll be just a ton of super cool stuff before them. So, Wan Johnson, yes, that was like my dream when I was a kid, was to become an astronaut, and becoming a lawyer wasn't exactly the same, the same thing. But I remain a huge fan, and I still can sort of now actually what really excites me is the last 2 years, I can now really see a world where I could, through a totally different path, actually be involved in space or get to experience that before I die. And I just think that that's super cool. Space lawyer. Well, yeah, that's a thing. And I kind of could be, in effect, I could, in a very long-winded way, argue I kind of am right now, although I haven't ever done anything legally directly space-related yet, but it's kind of around the corner for me. So, hell yeah. Yes, Dan H. Space lawyer is definitely something. And I actually know a couple of people who are legitimate space lawyers, and I've even worked with them, and I'm kind of like, oh, that is like the coolest title that you could possibly get. It's not out of reach, which I think is just, it's an awesome time for everything going wrong in the world right now. There's a lot of good stuff going on. Cobras Tenshi, I could have worked for Kawasaki Heavy Industries. They produce rockets as well. I think they team up with Mitsubishi and a few others to, but even Japan has the private rocket companies. Horio's got his own setup right now, and there's a couple of, everywhere these things are popping up. So yes, Sugars, thumbs up before you forget. Yes, remember to thumbs up, like if you like. Anyway, I don't know. How did I get onto that? Of course, the comments, but yes. To me, right now, like last year, most rockets ever launched, most private companies doing the coolest stuff ever. The fact that now that NASA cannot launch people into space, it relies on SpaceX, and it soon is going to have the options of multiple companies that can launch large, heavy satellite space station materials and people into space. That we're about to have the first commercial space stations that are going to go into space and start like manufacturing stuff, and universities will be able to set up whole modules with like space observatories and stuff like that. There's so much really cool stuff happening right now with space, and it's just like going like this. It's just getting more and more. So yeah, this is a Japan show, but I'm definitely going to keep talking about that. Dan H, I am coming to that one. So yes, well spotted. This is an interesting one. So the Tokyo Metro, the Tokyo Subway system, which is a private company, has just announced that they are from January 17 are going to remove rubbish bins from train stations, which they say is part of improving security within train stations. And a lot of people reacting the way that they've reacted to similar moves in the past with removing the rubbish bins, that they do not like this. And this sounds like a BS. It sounds like the Tokyo Metro is just trying to save operating costs by not needing to clean out the rubbish bins, causing inconvenience to passengers and using security as an excuse. To be clear on this, I saw a lot of people reacting to the story saying, "Oh, this is because of the Shinrikyo thing from 1995. That's when they got rid of all the rubbish bins." I don't know if that's true. What I know is that when I came to Japan, there were tons more rubbish bins in 1998 and 1999 when I came to live in Japan. I guess back in 1995 there were lots of ashtrays everywhere, which there still were actually even in 1998. But what I saw and recall is that there was around 2000 or 2001, it wasn't Shinrikyo. And remember, the attacks on the subway didn't involve rubbish bins. They were just people dropping plastic bags of sarin liquid on trains and poking the bags and walking off. So it was... they might have done something after that. Certainly they started installing security cameras in train stations after the attacks, things like that. So they did definitely do things, but I don't know if that included taking out rubbish bins. What did happen was around 2000 or 2001, in fact, you know what, it might have even been 1999, come think of it, there was one nutter who was putting these little sort of cherry bombs. They weren't proper bombs, but they were like small little bombs that he was putting into lockers in train stations, and a couple of them exploded and did injure one or two people. They caught the nutter, but they decided when this was happening that, and I think this is right when there were a lot of Al-Qaeda attacks happening in different parts of the world as well, and when this one Japanese sort of crazy person started doing this, they they removed a lot of rubbish bins from places like Shibuya, and they stopped use of the lockers, and they did remove a lot of rubbish bins from JR stations. And what was interesting was, while it was expected that taking the rubbish bins away, particularly from places like Shibuya, might result in rubbish being more littering happening, it was an interesting sort of social thing that what seemed to happen was there was actually less rubbish, because people, what would happen in Shibuya before was, if there was a rubbish bin there, people would throw rubbish in. The rubbish would get full really quickly because there's so many people there, and people not knowing where to throw things would throw things around the rubbish bin. So the rubbish bin itself would become, very quickly a huge pile of rubbish. And this was the case all over the place in Shibuya, and that's why there are rats in Shibuya, like big, like literally as big as cats, like the song. Some of the sewer rats that you see in Shibuya are frighteningly huge, and it's because there was so much garbage everywhere. And so what happened, shockingly, was they discovered that when there were no rubbish bins anywhere, there was nowhere that was kind of like there was an okay to litter nearby, kind of an indication. And a lot of people were kind of frustrated. But the way Japanese people seem to generally react was they would hold on to the rubbish and take it home and throw it away at home. And when the Tokyo government realized this, they said, we're not going to put the rubbish bins back because we've discovered people little less if we reduce the number of rubbish bins. And, I hate the logic of it, because I appreciate the convenience of having rubbish bins that you can use all over the place. But, this resulted in, this is in the early 2000s that there was a big reduction in rubbish bins. And this also happened with some of the train stations. Taking them off the platforms, however, is annoying to me. Like, if I've been to the gym and I am on my way home, sometimes I want to have a drink on the way home, and I want to be able to throw the rubbish away when I'm done with that. I don't want to have to carry it home. But that's pretty much what everything is moving towards in Japan. I mean, it's nice to be in a country where people don't litter as much, and where this kind of psychology works. I don't think this would work in Australia or America or other places, but it does. But if you ask me, I don't think this is anything to do with Al-Qaeda. Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic, with immigration restrictions, the reducing the rubbish bins in train stations by the subway company. This is clearly them just trying to save overhead. And it will work, and it will just mean that people will carry their rubbish home, which will become the new expectation. But yeah, that was an interesting one. Quinn Rankin, what about drink vending machines? Most drink vending machines have a little rubbish bin right beside them, which you can use. I don't know, I hope Tokyo Metro is not going to get rid of those, because they're there to collect the rubbish from the vending machines. But yeah, sometimes they don't. I mean, that's getting less as well. To YY World Cup, they blocked off the bins on trains. Oh, is that another one? So yeah, I can imagine for specific kind of times, but there were big removal of rubbish bins. There was a big time when this happened, around 2000, and it stuck. Yeah, Dan H, the 4-day work week, I will get to that. In fact, now I'm just thinking, I think the story was there and I wasn't able to add it to this, so maybe it's not in here. And if it's not, let me quickly check. I will speak about it now. I mean, oh, that's right. I couldn't add it. Okay, I will talk about it now. Good call, Dan H. Yeah, so Panasonic announced, and it's not clear whether it's going to be across the whole company. I think they said that they're going to have it as an option, where they will allow employees to choose if they are to work 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week. Again, to be clear, I don't think they're talking about working less. They're talking about working 5 8-hour days or 4 10-hour days is the option. But yeah, they're promoting it as a work lifestyle thing. The problem for a lot of Japanese companies that pay based on salary is they pay based on the number of days worked rather than hours worked. And this is the other thing, where they expect you to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and work until 10 o'clock at night. So, the idea that people are going home after 8 hours and changing that to 10, they're working 10 hours anyway. So this is part of the reason why the 4-day work week idea hasn't really caught on. However, Yeah, and I don't know exactly what's behind it, but they are saying that they're buying into the idea, one, that it improves productivity of the people that are working, and two, they want to encourage their employees to be consumers. I mean, they're a consumer electronics company, among many other things, of course, Panasonic. They want to encourage people to be innovative and have hobbies and stuff like that, which is wonderful. I mean, it's actually like too good to believe or be true, if you ask me. And I can't help but think there might be some kind of cynical. This might be a way to reduce overhead. Like maybe they're offering this to part-time workers or contract workers or whatever as a way to sort of increase the number of people that work on lower wages and for less hours when they're having trouble selling. That's the cynic in me says that, but what they're saying aligns with what I want people to say, which is that this is a good idea. And as I've talked about on the show before, with automation coming, where most jobs are going to be even jobs that are not labor intensive or laborious or like mechanical in nature or repetitive, most jobs are going to become easier and easier to automate. And there is this question about, well, but you need people to buy the products that are being created. So there is this whole problem coming about what do you do when you're able to automate so rapidly that you're going to have these workforces of people that well, there is a fear that people might have nothing to do. My experience of improving efficiency is that it's like a pie eating contest where you have to eat more pie. You generally end up, you don't get less busy with efficiency savings. Unfortunately, you just get pressured to find more efficiency savings. But there is a long-term picture here that this is something maybe that the economy needs to convert to, and particularly for Japan's situation, where with the elderly population and so on, and trying to figure out ways to keep people in employment as the economy itself declines. I think this is a really great solution. And the fact that a real big, old-fashioned, traditional manufacturer like Panasonic is announcing that they are going throughout the company to start offering 4-day work weeks is pretty groundbreaking in Japan. Apparently 8% of companies in Japan say that they do this, although again I do worry that they're equating having part-time and non-full-time employees with allowing a flexible working week. But there are more and more small startups and so on that are using this. Of course, the experiment from Microsoft in Japan showed that there was actually higher productivity. And remember, no reduction of working hours for this. This was same full-time working hours, but compressed into 4 days. They found better overall happiness and productivity from people that did that. So the data says this is a good idea. I don't work in a place that offers that. I would love for to be my company or for other companies to do this. The fact that traditional Japanese companies are doing this is great, and I think it's an experiment I would like to see happen in Japan. I think Japan could really benefit from it. So yeah, I don't have the news story link in here. I did tweet about it earlier today, but I think it's fascinating, and good call out, Dan H, for reminding me of it. Theodore Sharp, they have cameras on the trains too. Yeah, that's more of a recent thing, but yes, indeed, and that is a security thing. Quint Rankid, there are people in Japan who work 8-hour days, as I just said. No, there are not, in truth, but that's. But there again, the Labour Standards Bureau has become a lot tougher on auditing recorded working hours to make sure that if they're not working, that if they are working overtime, that overtime is properly recorded. But yes. Yeah, Cobra Tenchi, 4 days a week at 10 hours, you'd take that. I mean, like I say, most jobs in Japan are 10 hours a day anyway, so yeah, totally. If you could work for 4 hours on that 4 days on that basis, again, I don't see how that would work in a lot of situations, just where it's so expected that everybody is supposed to be on board and available at the same times. But yeah, that seems to be it. Dan H, Australians and Japanese signing a defense pact. Do I see America allowing Japan to build nuclear weapons soon to respond to China and North Korea? No, I don't. I don't see nuclear weapons. No, I don't see them allowing Japan to build nuclear weapons. I see them allowing. I don't see Japan allowing itself to build nuclear weapons. So Japan hasn't expressed an interest in doing that. I think Japan has the capability to build nuclear weapons. I mean, they've got a ton of nuclear waste material within Japan. They have. They even had this Epsilon rocket that basically is a small. It's a perfect sort of nuclear missile if they ever wanted to use it for that purpose. They made this. They said it's for small satellites. But Japan has all of the parts to put together very quickly a nuclear program if they ever wanted one, but I don't think they want one. America's wanted Japan to, be more proactive, offering troops and, participating in its own defense. But Japan says, well, that would cost money, and the constitution that you imposed on us says that we're not allowed to do it. So here, that's pretty much how Japan, and even conservatives, even hawks in Japan that want to normalize the military. I don't think, even within that, I would say it'd be a very small minority that wants nuclear weapons. Probably anyone confidentially would say having it as a last resort for as a deterrent against China, but I don't think people see a need for that right now. So I don't see that. It is interesting, of course, signing the defense pact with America and Japan wanting to get led into Five Eyes and all that sort of stuff, but I can't see Japan building nuclear weapons for America. Cobra Senshi, I think a 4-day work week would allow for parents to bond more with their children. Yeah, I mean, and although that would be interesting as well, because right now Japanese kids still do attend school on a Saturday at least once a month. Some schools twice a month. It used to be this kids went to school 6 days a week. So there's a thing as well. Do you reduce the number of school days, and what effect would that have if you've got kids at home an extra day? Then can that impact on parents that aren't in the same working situation? So interesting situation. Final stories. 4 more. I'll be really quick. Tokyo had proper snow the other day. About once every 2 years we get a proper snow. This all happened during the day either. It wasn't over a prolonged period. It was an intense short snowstorm. All of the country is under meters of snow, and whenever Tokyo gets snow, it dominates the news cycle, and everybody kind of resents Tokyo taking up all the news again over them not being able to handle a few centimeters of snow. And that's true. Tokyo can't handle a few centimeters of snow, and it is pathetic. But at the same time, what happened in this case was it fell really fast, and then it stopped. It stopped right before nighttime, and it started kind of a little bit melting, and then night hit, and then it all froze. And there was all of this black ice everywhere that you couldn't chip off the roads. So it was like the next day, any place that doesn't get like direct sunlight, and there are places near where I am that are like this, whole areas of road that are like in between buildings and stuff like that were just covered in black ice that you cannot walk on. I mean, even doing the penguin walk or whatever, if there's even a slight incline or anything, you're just screwed, and cars can't drive on it and people can't walk. And there are hundreds of people in Tokyo who have had broken bones from slipping and so on. And yes, again, everyone's laughing at Tokyo, but that is what happened. It is cool. Tokyo having snow is cool, and it doesn't happen very often. And it's lovely when it's happening, but it's pretty awful when it turns into ice, and that's what we still have outside at the moment. It's why I haven't run the last few days. I wouldn't want to go on a run, and so I'm sure I would slip and probably hurt myself. So the James Webb telescope, as I mentioned earlier, is now fully deployed. This thing is just a beast. It's going to be a while before we see photos from it, but that is still a $10 billion. And the fact that it all went, the coolest thing about the deployment, apart from the fact that it involved so many, it was like this Rube Goldberg machine that involved hundreds of parts over weeks, all moving to go into place, and it all worked. And if one point of failure had failed, the whole thing, $10 billion telescope, would have failed. The awesome thing is, not only did it all work, but it all worked so well that it saved a ton of fuel. That they were planning for a whole bunch of fuel to make corrections and allowing for things to go wrong, and everything happened like so well that they hardly used any fuel, and they'll need that fuel to stay at the L2 Lagrange point, where it's going to be sort of posted. And the plan was therefore there only to be enough fuel to stay on that spot for 10 years. So there's going to be this 10-year time limit of being able to use the telescope because of the rocket fuel on board, and it's too far out to replace or refuel. But it turns out that they've managed to save so much of the fuel that they were expecting to burn getting out there that they reckon it might be able to stay there like 15, 20 years now. And one would hope that if we have 15 or 20 years, someone might figure out a way to take a tank of gas out to refuel it sometime, before you lose a $10 billion best telescope ever, made in humankind. So it is a very, very long way out, of course, not easy to refuel at all, but one hopes that there might be solutions for it in 20 years, or even in 10 years. So still can't wait to start seeing photos from this thing, but that is awesome. I mentioned this last week, by the way. This series is really, really great. There's this whole channel, extra credits. Oh, it's playing, don't play. Extra credits, extra history sub thread of the extra credits channel on YouTube. They do these sort of very well narrated, very engaging 8 to 10 minute sort of stories, but it's like storytelling, and it's done in a really, really engaging, enlightening way. They do fantastic research how they put these things together. And the current series, this is episode 5. I think there's going to be a couple more. But this is basically how Japan became a militarist government that invaded China and went into World War II. And it goes through the whole story through, how Japan was a democracy, but how bit by bit the military went out of control and chipped away at it. And again, they tell the story so well today, and there's so much nuance to it, and it's so hard to understand. There was always just this assumption that, Japan just decided to invade China, and everybody invaded China, and they decided let's be fascist, and they were horrible, and then they lost. There's a very simplistic story that we learn in history schools, in history in school, and this tells the full kind of no, there were tons of factions, and there were disobedient soldiers, and there were factions within the military, and there was the emperor ordered to crack down on the military, and they did, but then other people came in, and there's just tons of stuff, and it's really head spinning to keep up with. But this is one of the best explanations and narratives about what happened leading up to World War II, and how Japan ended up in World War II, and how it ended up kind of with this crazy out of control military running things. And it's not easy to follow. It's not like the rise of Hitler at all. But it had a very similar result in some ways. So I highly recommend it. Anyway, if you watch this, if you're interested in Japan, to me this is one of the best. It's all history. I don't think there's anything in it I haven't heard of before, but there were some little nuggets in there that I thought, wow, is that what happened? Like, for example, there's the February 26th incident that involved a major coup against the Japanese government in 1941. Where Emperor Hirohito, basically Showa Emperor, made a public statement disowning the military forces that had murdered a whole bunch of, basically wiped out the government, and a whole bunch of assassinations, and taken over the government in the name of the emperor, of restoring the emperor to power. And the emperor said, I don't know who these guys are. Lay down your arms, surrender. You don't speak for me. And they did, and they all got executed. Which showed that if the emperor had the ability to bring the country under control, but he didn't at other times, but he did in this incident. Just great stuff. Anyway, so I do recommend that highly. Today there was another case. There was a person apparently inspired by I am over time, but this happened today. We had these 2 train setting fire, murdering people incidents. The second one with the guy dressed up like the Joker, who was inspired by the first one, and now there's another copycat. And this is another problem about being in a country with 120 million people all close together watching the news, is that you do get copycat crimes. The last one, by the way, involved a person who was from Fukuoka, from Kitakyushu, who, when he decided he wanted to be famous and get the death penalty by murdering people on a train, he was living in Kitakyushu. He flew up to Tokyo, spent a day or two homeless, and then basically decided to attack the train. Why travel all the way to Tokyo to do this, you ask yourself? Well, now another person from Nagasaki, a 28-year-old, went and did kind of the same thing. He ended up taking hostage a Yakiniku restaurant. Obviously, it seems like he's probably not well in the head. He said that he was planning to do the same kind of attack as the guy from Kitakyushu. He traveled all the way up to Tokyo. He slept on the street for a few days in Shibuya, and then right before he told the people in the restaurant, before he goes and murders people on a train, he wants to eat yakiniku, and he held the yakiniku restaurant manager hostage. So the police came in and basically arrested the guy, but he declared that he was planning another mass murder. Get help and stay at home. Don't come to Tokyo. Obviously, this is someone who actually probably needed, no question, needed counseling first. And this does highlight that Japan just doesn't have a lot of outlets. And this person announced that he wanted to kill himself via the justice system or police. In the end of the day, thank heavens, it looks like he didn't actually. He pretended to have a bomb. Or you know what? Yeah, yeah. He says that he didn't have a reason for living and he wanted the police to kill him for himself. But again, just narcissistic and selfish, and at the same time very sad. I mean, if he wanted to kill himself. But again, there's no support or mental health support for people like this anywhere. But again, I mean, but the mean part of me says, if you want to end it, get help. But if you're going to do it at home. Like, why? Don't come all the way to Tokyo to do it. Go talk with your family. Jeez, I mean, kind of horrible, but yeah, clearly going for attention as well. So that was another weird thing that happened today. Finally, I don't know about this burger chain, but there's this new burger chain that's just started up. They use imperial units, so I assume it's American. It's called Blue Star Burger, and all of their offerings look incredibly unhealthy. And I want one, so I'm probably going to go there. Anyway, I don't know. Does anyone in the chat know about this burger place? I do want to go check it out. Sainted Sir, that's all the topics for tonight. We are way over time. I didn't expect I'd go this far over time, but I never do. I wish I got the camera going properly. I will try to sort that out next week. There will be a higher resolution video through the whole thing. One Johnson, be funny if a 4-day work week had an impact on the birth rate. I suspect a 4-day work week might have the opposite effect, but yes, who knows? It could work or it could backfire. Final comment, Sainted Sir, great to see you. Quint Ranked, influence of Bismarck in both countries. Interesting one. Again, on a lot of these things, on Voices of the Past, talking about the delegations that toured Europe when they were in Meiji period, when they were building up Japan. Japan was very enamored with the Prussians, and the Prussians, because the Prussians were themselves were sort of at the mercy of other powers in Europe. And they advised the Japanese, don't trust anybody, be like us, build up, be strong, because, we have to be strong once we're in this horrible neighborhood where we're surrounded by all these other powerful countries like Napoleon's France, so, this is earlier in the 19th century, and Russia and Britain and France, and, they all have their empires and so on, and, we're just a brand new country trying to survive, and you're like us, and don't let these people screw you over. And Japan took Germany took Prussia, and then from extension beyond that, Germany kind of sympathetically to some point. But again, you look at this, you realize that the Japanese government participated in the Washington Conference, where it was essentially an ally of the US and Britain, and it was the Young Turks that wanted to side with the Germans because they saw America and Britain as undermining them. So even that, there were elements and factions that admired Germany and Bismarck and so on, and there were elements that didn't. But yeah, and remember that Japan did take advantage. Japan fought against Germany in World War I and took its German possessions in China and in the Pacific, some of them anyway. So yeah, it's an interesting one. AV84K finished The Woman in the White Kimono yesterday, a story about how half American Japanese babies were viewed in 1957 and many were aborted or killed. Best Christmas present. That sounds bleak. I assume you're recommending it sincerely. That sounds kind of horrible. But yeah, of course, a big part of the population today, thank heavens. But yeah, that sounds dark. If you recommend it, I will check. How did you watch it? Well, what service was it on? I'm curious, but that sounds a bit awful. Going down, BTC Chiba, peace indeed. Good to see you, and thank you all. I am going to end it there. It's been late, 11:50. Remember, if you please like the video. It does really help. It's great to see you guys every week. I've got nothing else to do. I'll be back here next week. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. If you want to follow this during the week or interact with me, do stay safe. Omicron is not it's not something I want to catch. I assume I don't want any of you to get it, so please do take care of yourselves. Take all the necessary precautions, and stay safe. I'll talk to you all later, and peace. Boom. Camera technical issues. I wish I could have gotten it going, but thanks everybody for joining. Thank you for keeping me company. I'll talk to you later. Bye.